quick introduction before we move on to the ARMIS section. Cybersecurity is such a hot and important area in the NHS right now. If any of you happen to read the National Centre for Cybersecurity last year, and the amount of the amount of impetus that was put on foreign actors and around challenges, particularly with AI coming in as well. It's such an important area, and that every good NHS organisation should be looking at this. I am delighted to welcome Ben Ranking, who is the Head of Healthcare and Public Sector for ARMIS. I am great to welcome Jeffrey Wood, who's the Deputy Director of ICT at Princess Alexandra Hospital NHS Trust. And last but not least, we have Mo Wakas. Thank you, sorry. The CTO for Healthcare at ARMIS. So I will hand over to you, and really looking forward to hearing about your session.
Lovely, thank you very much. So we want to make this open. Obviously, we have such a massive audience here right now. But I want to ensure that you can ask questions, you can participate, you can ask about anything that we're talking about, because cyber resilience is such a hot topic, but it also doesn't have as much information around it as it should. It's a very generic topic which can be interpreted in a myriad of ways, which leads me on to my first question of what does cyber resilience mean to you, Mo?
Well, from my perspective, if I take a step back and look at it, right, what is it that hospitals, whether it's globally, whether it's the NHS, what's their core competency? It is about delivering patient care. And where resilience comes in, whether it's operational or something that's supported by cyber, is ensuring the continuity and the availability of the organization to deliver patient care. And anything that supports that, whether there's a cyber attack that happens, whether there's a natural catastrophe that happens, at the end of the day, it's all about helping maintain and ensure continuity of operations and patient care delivery.
Yeah, absolutely. Is mine on? Okay. Yeah, I absolutely agree, Mo. For me, cyber resilience is about keeping the hospital open and running. It's the outcomes. It doesn't matter whether we're under a cyber attack or anything. It's about what can we do to keep the hospital running in all circumstances, and how quickly we can get back from a cyber attack so that the hospital is running at its maximum capacity. And with winter coming up, I'm sure NHS trusts that are out there in the audience will realise that this is the hardest time of year for us. So any cyber attack at this time, anything that affects our performance, anything that reduces our abilities to operate at maximum capacity is a major issue for us. So cyber resilience for me is about that outcome of keeping the hospital running.
I think that's a key point you've said. You've barely mentioned cybersecurity throughout that entire conversation, both of you. It's not about cybersecurity, it's about security. It's about risk. It's about not just being cyber risk. Risk within an organization is clinical risk. If your computers stop working, can you help patients? Probably not. If we saw what happened with Synovis earlier on in the year, where a third-party solution got taken down and we didn't have blood, we couldn't help patients, we couldn't perform surgeries. We had, sorry if I'm wrong with what blood type it was, I think it was O negative, that we had to give to everybody because they didn't have the ability to identify what blood they had, which caused a national shortage of that blood type because of a cyber attack. That is the impact. And the second question, still talking about cybersecurity, in the past 2 weeks alone, I personally know of at least 7 cyber attacks on UK hospitals. Some of them have made the news and some of them haven't. Over to you, Mo, with the rise in nation-state attacks, whether it's confirmed or not confirmed, but we're pretty sure it is a nation-state attack on the UK NHS. From a global perspective, what are you seeing globally around this style of attack?
Yeah, I think what's happening is cyber attacks are getting more complex, and where attackers come, nation state attackers and what have you, all these fancy terms. Essentially, what they're doing is they're just making sure that they target organizations specifically. So it's not just a broad-based, I'm just going to attack every single type of organization. Those are the lower level attackers, but attackers are getting more complex, right? They understand who's this NHS trust, who's the leadership, what type of software, devices, applications they might be running, and they craft special attacks just for them to maximize the level of damage. And what we're seeing is, to your point, Ben, third-party providers, whether it's lab service providers or other types of clinical providers, them getting attacked, because what happens there, you're seeing a whole bunch of different hospitals getting affected. You see the ability to move from that service provider to all the different NHS trusts that are connected to it. So they're also getting smarter and more efficient with their attacks to cause even more damage. And then we were talking earlier about geopolitical scenarios where, because of your alliance with whichever country or group, that'll increase the number of targets that you're going through, because because of the side that you've picked in Russia versus Ukraine. So that also primes attackers for the targets that they want to go through, and their target is critical infrastructure, and healthcare is the most attacked industry globally as well. So I think those are my thoughts there.
Yeah, again, absolutely agree. It is the third-party suppliers that is probably causing us the most issues. 5,400 people were arrested over the last few weeks from Interpol. But again, that really doesn't make a huge amount of difference to us because we're still being attacked. It's like the Hydra. The more heads you cut off, the more suddenly appear. And we have found our biggest weakness has been our third-party providers. We had a financial institution that was attacked recently, not being able to pay the bills that we need to be able to pay, not being able to get the money in that we need to be able to get in, affected a lot of NHS trusts. And it's surprising how much of an impact that suddenly has to a hospital not being able to buy the drugs that it needs to treat the patient. So no matter how low level the third party seems, it does have a massive impact into the NHS each time.
And if I can just bring something up that you just mentioned, there's a whole bunch of supporting services that support patient care delivery, right? So something from the HVAC units that control the humidity levels and ensure there's no desterilization that happens in an operating room. If that HVAC system goes down, even though it's not a medical device touching a patient, there's still impact to patient care. So one of the largest attacks that happened in the US related to Change Healthcare was because of an impact to the billing systems and the pharmacy systems, right? So patients weren't able to get their medications because they couldn't pay for it, because insurance providers couldn't be billed for it. So that attack, I think it's upwards of 1 billion, almost 2 billion in cost, not to mention months and months and months of backlogs when it comes to patient care. So that's the other thing to think about when we're talking about cyber resilience. It's not a point in time. It's not going to be, hey, I got attacked on Monday or something went down on Monday and you know what, Wednesday I'm back up and running. Think about all the surgeries that need to get canceled and rebooked and how many patients get affected. And also the cost is not only about how much ransom somebody might demand, but it's also the downtimes when it comes to, or the cost related to, hey, it took 48 hours of resources to get this back online. We had to pay an incident response firm to come in and help with their expertise. So this concept and notion of, whether it's only medical devices or computers that are at risk, there's a whole complex ecosystem that supports patient care delivery, and any of these going down impact the overall availability.
No, awesome. Thank you, Mo. Just for a brief pause, are there any questions of anything we've done so far? I mean, I'm going to come to you with the microphone.
I have a question about the third-party suppliers that you say are potentially part of the risk behind all of this. Do you think the NHS is putting in their contracts and their qualification criteria sufficient sufficiently robust criteria to support the mitigation of that cyber risk? Do we need to be more aware of that and start upping the game as far as the contractual requirements, etc., going forward? Or at least going, as soon as contracts come up for renewal, do we need to be much more firm and get those standards right up to prevent that?
So I'll pick that one up. I'll pick that one up as I am NHS. Yeah, the problem is that at the moment still the NHS is not joined up. We're one organisation ultimately, but we're still operating as trusts. I still don't even think within ICS, ICBs that we are operating as one ICS, one ICB. We are still a number of trusts in our ICS and our ICB. I can answer for me in that we are very tight on our contracts, in that everybody has to complete a security questionnaire before they even get to evaluation mode. But a lot of organisations don't do that. I'm well aware that a lot of organisations don't do that. And it's crazy that we're not getting our questionnaire out to those other areas and saying, here you go, NHS England, here's our questionnaire. Adapt it, use it, join in lots of other questionnaires, pick out the best questions from each of those and make sure they go into each NHS standard terms and conditions. And you're right, we are absolutely missing a trick with this one, but it's really hard to join us up, really is.
Anything else? No, that was good. I think that third-party risk is probably the most famous ones we've seen recently. As we can see with CrowdStrike, for example, as we saw with Synovis, third-party risk is probably one of the most important things that we have across healthcare globally. Sorry, Mo, you look like you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to add, there's the contractual perspective, which I think we're baking in maybe newer contracts. There's always the challenge of how do we secure what's already there, right? And a prime example that I like to give is, how do we know from our vendors and third parties how many of them have, team viewer access or some type of a remote access into the environment? And that's already existing. That is literally existing today. So we're trying to stop the bleeding from one perspective, which is absolutely phenomenal, right? Cyber resilience and security is about progress, not perfection. So 100%, we bake it into the contracts. That's absolutely needed. I think number two is we need to start mandating, right, to your point, Jeff, even security controls and posture requirements that third-party providers should adhere to or need to adhere to, rather. And I think we need to be better at understanding what's my current risk today as well. Because what's going to happen is it's the older technologies that are running these agents, and what will end up happening is those are the most vulnerable. So while we're bringing in new, amazing, up-to-date software and technology, it's really the old ones that pose the most significant risk in our environment, and those are the ones that vendors have access into. And it's not for malicious purposes. It's literally like, you know what, if something goes down or if there's an error, I can very quickly restore it. And again, restore that patient care availability, but at what cost now, especially considering that they're much more targeted. So I think there's multiple phases, contractual being one of them, absolutely, security controls for newer devices, and then how do we address the existing ones as well.
So the third question we had, I think, is so open that I want you to both deliver your feedback on it. Because the reason why I'm asking this question is because it's a question that I get asked day in, day out in the field of, what do you do about AI? So artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. How is AI impacting what we do day in, day out? And feel free to tell me what you think about AI as well, or what we perceive AI to be at the minute. We'll start with you, Jeff. We'll mix it up.
Thanks for that. AI isn't all that it's hyped to be, I would say. However, it is a danger for us in the NHS. There are some really good uses of AI for us. I mean, we've written policies in like 10 minutes where we could have taken hours to do that before. We've written standing operating procedures, SOPs, in short amount of time that would have taken us ages. But it's about what data we give the AI to allow it to make what we need it to do. And I think the internal facing AI is going to be a massive improvement for the NHS. The external AIs, and even though, and I will mention ChatGPT, has been brilliant for us, however, we cannot trust our users. We struggle to trust them with the correct password type of security. We were talking at lunchtime, Ben, and we sort of gave a load of USBs out, just dropped them in the car park. And it's surprising how many people will pick up that USB stick, plug it into their laptop at work, and suddenly find a message coming up saying, yeah, you've been caught, you shouldn't be doing this, it's not part of the policy, etc., etc. So allowing external generative AI to be able to do things with our data is something we've absolutely blocked. But we're trying to find that internal thing, because the technology there is amazing and can really free up time. And going back to the very first question about cyber resilience, this is about making life easier for our clinicians so they spend more time in front of patients, so patients get treated better. What we're trying to do is stop the data leakage, but not stop the innovation.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the innovation part. I think that I would say AI is it's ushering in a completely new era of innovation, and it's making that innovation much more accessible. Because you know what? Physicians are coming out and saying, well, hey, I can do X, Y, and Z with all this, how easy it is to either crunch the data or how much data I have at my fingertips. And they're at the forefront of innovation without being programmers or AI scientists. They just understand the patient journey and where all these different efficiencies can come in with AI. But it also comes with the challenges, as Jeff was mentioning, right? In terms of, hey, what about any type of privacy implications? What about data security implications? And it's not just uploading your data and it's, you know what, it's someone else within UK can see it. It's also about where does that data get transferred to? Is it going to Japan? Is it going to the US? So there's also the regional elements. Now, if I look at it kind of tying back to cyber attacks, right? What does that mean? It means that the bad guys are also getting, they're working smarter, not harder. They can very quickly and easily get data, how we were talking about nation state and more complex attacks. Well, they actually have the ability to also map out the risks for a trust even faster than the trust can itself as well, right? So they're getting more visibility into different organizations and different risk patterns that's allowing them to be faster and more complex in their attacks, and it's resulting in much larger impact and downtimes across patient care. So I think it's twofold. One is innovation is great, but the other part is attackers are using it. Now, the but the complicated part of us being the good guys and trying to protect organizations is we operate with guardrails on, right? There's things that you can and cannot do with AI, should and shouldn't do with AI. The attackers don't. They don't operate with the guardrails. They're just looking at how can I cause the maximum amount of damage in the fastest way possible.
And that goes back to what we spoke about the other day, Jeff, is day in, day out, you have to be right 100% of the time. An attacker needs to get lucky once, and that's what impacts you. And I think the general conception of how is AI going to attack us, AI isn't. It's the data that you're feeding to the AI that will build up ideas of the best way to attack you. So that's going to help you sleep tonight. It's not Skynet. It could be, but you never know. Anyway, so next question. So despite the use of traditional security tools, how are we going to improve cyber resilience? Because evidently, they're not working. As someone who used to work at a firewall vendor, what can we do better? How do we get better? What do we need?
NHS is
massive question. Sorry, that takes us a little bit of thinking.
Yeah, I think that one does. For me, it's always about layering. There isn't a golden bullet. I think the more, and whether they're overlapping or not overlapping, and again, there are problems with overlapping security applications as as we know, they sometimes cancel each other out or cause issues. But we need a number of different systems in place to protect us. And the first thing, and again, I hate to say armies here, but the first thing for me is about understanding what your attack plane is, how much of that vector is there to attack any device from any level across a myriad now of technology uses. I mean, our phones are now cloud. So pretty much when our network goes down, we don't just lose our PCs, we lose all of our communications as well. And having to build a resilience for that with private 5G networks and WhatsApp-style alerting modules for our clinicians on clinical risks and emergencies that go out has been really tough for the last couple of years. Trying to find that technology to plug the gaps has been the most difficult thing I've probably come across in the last couple of years. It's starting to improve, but there are still massive gaps that we're always looking at and trying to plug.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, what I like doing is when I get in a room with a CISO, a CTO, an executive, down to the security engineering team, clinical engineering team, doesn't really matter. I think what's missing from my perspective is taking it a step back and saying, what's the risk that's posed not only to your laptops and computers that you can probably tell me, does it have antivirus, does it have, is it up to date with patches, etc. But what's all the different ways that your patient care service is affected? What's the risk that's posed to the actual service that you're offering patients? And the reason I bring this up is historically we've been really good at managing IT risk. But now what's happening is there's a whole bunch of different risks that's a result of whether it's cybersecurity vulnerabilities, whether it's any type of other risk that exists, data risk, etc., or the fact that data is hosted in the cloud or our infrastructure has evolved, or digital transformation and smart devices, smart hospitals, etc., that as I was mentioning, that HVAC unit that's connected in a smart manner to an OR, that needs to be taken into account when we're talking about the stability and the security and the availability of a patient service. So I think from my perspective, Jeff, you alluded to this, is that visibility goes beyond simply an IT person knowing what's on their laptop. It's about mapping relationships on what is my ER, whether it's an EMR reliant on, what does that architecture look like, but also what's the bedside monitors that it supports. Right? What's the nurse call systems that plug into this? Because all of this comprise of the ER department. Here's what's needed for my bedside application, right? Here's what's needed to ensure its uptime. And then you start prioritizing. Now that I understand my risk and I understand what's my most critical service that is impacting, how can I deploy, whether it's compensating controls or security or defense in depth versus the resources versus what's my cost benefit and ROI in helping ensure my most critical services stay up given the resources that I have?
No, I think you're entirely right. I think what we've seen, especially since COVID, healthcare has rapidly, digitally transformed itself. And we've been adopting new, more connected, more interoperable technologies at a drastic rate, but we've just not had the security that's kept up. We're adopting a myriad of new technologies all of the time, and security is always an afterthought. Because it's, as long as it's connected, we can manage it, we can see it, we can do X, we can do Y, we can do Z. But is it safe? Is it secure? Is it a risk? And 9 times out of 10 in the hospitals that I've seen or worked with over the past 10 years, security is always an afterthought, which is alarming. But anyway, so the last question. Let's keep it no, actually, any questions from the audience? Final questions. Anyone? Okay, so from a final question that I'm going to ask you both. In a sentence or two tops. Oh, got it fine. What do you think the key to improving cyber resilience is?
Knowledge. Yeah, at the end of the day, we need to know what risks are, what our gaps are, and understanding how we can plug them. So one of the things that I've done with our team, and it's a shame because NHS England had budget this year for getting teams cyber secure aware. And it was a really great idea, and I was really backing it 100%. But unfortunately, it got pulled just recently, within the last week or so. So now I'm hastily trying to find budget to actually get my teams to a level. And it's not just the internal ICT teams; it's across everywhere. So I think the knowledge of cyber issues across the whole trust and external. So digital inclusivity comes in here as well, getting people outside the NHS to understand what they are facing every day, just those basic things that they can do to protect themselves, which eventually protects the NHS and all public sector is my main focus, I guess.
To be fair, that was more than 2 sentences. But anyway, my theme comes down to collaboration. I think it's really important for organizations to understand that cybersecurity is not only the responsibility of cybersecurity teams, but also understand that the cybersecurity team needs HTM and clinical engineering teams. When they're trying to secure medical devices or other things, they need the expertise of HTM to understand either A, how they operate, or B, cybersecurity teams aren't going to be the ones securing the medical devices. It'll be HTM. And you can say the same for facilities management. You can say the same thing for infrastructure management. You can say the same thing for physical security with the IoT cameras, everything. So I think now it's ushering in as well an era of collaboration that cybersecurity is now really fueling, because that extension, you've heard that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. That's truer now more than ever.
Awesome. Thank you, Mo. And if there's no other questions, thank you very much, everyone, for turning up. I know you all probably want to go home, but any questions, we're at stand B1. Feel free to pop over, but thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.